It's your update of 22nd of June 2021. A lot of big news. Do send information to me at that address or go to the site to look at past presentations. Okay, so here's a little graphic. This is a good site to go to. This is basically just telling us what we know already about carbon footprints, walking at 0 grams, cycling 8 grams, motorcycle 81 grams, gasoline car 208, and capacity in terms of people per hour on a 3.5 meter wide lane. Walking's high, cycling's
Only
high.
if you slip in this, because
Hybrid car, gasoline car. Be quiet, Mark. Okay. So that's a nice graphic for you. Thanks to Daniel Moser for that. And here is Adam Tranter's motor parklet. Now, the story about this is that Adam put a parklet somewhere near him, and it was taken away because it wasn't a motor vehicle parking there. So he's got this old motor vehicle and he's made it into a parklet and he's parking it there, and so far it hasn't been interfered with or told to go away. There are issues about what can happen if you use trailers or whatever else. So that's a nice little graphic for you, a nice little image for you. Okay, here's the big news. New letter from Rupert Furness of the Department for Transport on the Active Travel Fund for 2021-2022. And amongst other things, the Department for Transport is seeking 12 areas away from London to install mini Holland schemes and 4 areas to pilot GP-based social prescribing of cycling and walking. The DFT will now require local authorities to consult residents. However, consultation does not mean giving anyone a veto requiring consensus on schemes or prioritizing the loudest voices. If you want to read about it, there's a nice article by Carlton Reid. He also did have a PDF of the actual letter, which is in the public domain because it's gone to local authorities. However, it's not on the DFT website. I think if you click on that link, you might be able to see it, but Carlton took it down because someone had taken it down without referring to Carlton's article. So if you really do want to see a copy, you can email me and I'll send you one. It's 5 pages long, unlike the previous letters. One other thing is that one-day training events on local transport note 120 will be held. So this is the big news about the next funding tranche. Actually, I don't think that's 21-22. Yes, yeah, it is 21-22. Or is it 22-23? I'm confused, but it's the next tranche anyway. And that's important because they're looking for mini Hollands and GP-based social prescribing, and still pushing very heavily on the fact that you must reallocate road space. This is a requirement. It's not a how about thinking about it, and you have to be in tune with LTN 120. So it's another firm steer from the Conservative government, and people who are opposing it are opposing the current government. Okay, next bit of news, another good bit of news, which you can read. It's a little article in the Evening Standard, and that was that the Court of Appeal last Wednesday overturned the High Court decision from January that Transport for London's street space scheme in Bishopsgate, which banned black taxis from several streets during the weekdays, was illegal. So street space can now go ahead again, and that's good news. The ruling gives the green light to TfL to continue the citywide rollout of wider pavements, etc. And here's numbers of the total numbers of low traffic neighbourhoods, pedestrian schemes, and miles of cycle route. So I don't know if the judgment and reasons for it are actually laid out anywhere, but anyway, it's a judgment overturning the ban from last January. Okay, we mentioned Part 6 Traffic Management Act 2004, comments by Baroness Veer, the transport person in the Lords. And if you want to read stuff about it, there's a link for you. You may have to go to Hansard to see exactly what she said about the timescales and so on. Right, this is some more work for you all to do. The All-Party Parliamentary Cycling and Walking Group is having an inquiry on the Cycling and Walking Investment Strategy 2. And it's got a call for evidence, and you should make your submissions to the APPCWG by the 16th of July. So not much time. And if you do have things which you really want to say about CWIS, please do send your thoughts in, and go to that link to see exactly what the terms and conditions of the inquiry are and what you should be writing about. But that's something for you to do. Now, next bit of big news, Cycling UK tried to get a judicial review of the removal of the Shoreham cycle lane. And after the High Court refused a JR on the removal of the cycle lane, Cycling UK has now appealed against the High Court decision to refuse a JR. So the initial application for the JR was in February. It was turned down. They're appealing. So good luck with that. Let's see what happens with that. Also on JRs, Better Streets for Kensington and Chelsea have now sent papers to Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea with regard to Kensington High Street cycle lanes removal. So they are carrying on with their legal challenge there with papers which were submitted last week. So that's hopefully, good luck to them. And the last big news this week, today, there's a freeze on all new road building projects in Wales. So as you can see, a lot happening. And here's the Detective Chief Superintendent Andy Cox's asks. We're doing a little section on that. And what he said this week, in response to a tweet from the AA president about how most drivers don't think they'll get caught for their offences. Andy says, deterrence is important, but the police can't be everywhere. That's why dash cam reporting will be game-changing. 24/7, 365 days a week opportunity for the public to be part of the solution to reducing road danger. Your victim blaming for tonight. Yeah, I'm breaking my rule about not going outside the UK. This is from France. Here are little bracelets that you have with you with your contact details. Those of us who do cycle sport or hill walking or things like that may be used to having your contact details around with you. But they're saying, always go with a means of identification in case of an accident, not just for sport, but for everyday bike riding. So talk about dangerizing. This is saying everyday bike riding requires you to be thought of as some person who is engaging in a dangerous activity. That's from France. Now, Thames Valley Police, they sent out this very ill-thought tweet. Let me just go through what's wrong with it. Saying you're vulnerable road users, so wear lids, high vis, etc. And also don't wear t-shirts and shorts because they're for beaches, not for roads. So don't wear a t-shirt when you're riding a bike. Now, the reason they've got into this is because they've confused motorcycling and cycling, throwing them both in together. Now, that's a big mistake, yeah, because motorcycling and cycling are completely different, not just in terms of active travel and sustainability, but because motorcycling is far, far, far more hazardous. But on top of that, it's also more dangerous to other road users, particularly pedestrians. Another point to make about it, the telling motorcyclists not to wear shorts is very much part of the campaign to what the slogan is, dress for the slide, not for the ride. And of course, those of you who know that I'm going to start talking about risk compensation, this process of getting ordinary motorcyclists to dress up like they're doing TT racing is something that actually will exacerbate their potential to endanger other road users. Something to be thought of there. And another mention of Derbyshire Roads Policing Unit as from last week, I mentioned that, but Devon and Cornwall Police joined in as well. So I had a response to them about their lack of knowledge about cycle helmets. Here's your equalities page. As new, there's the Cycling UK Women's Festival of Cycling. Do get in there, register an event, and don't forget Kiddical Mass on Sunday, 11th of July in London. Okay, here's the reading list. Look at the new things here at the top. Cycle lane consultation, a test case for action. This is about stuff in Scotland. Phil Jones does the basic introduction on gear change in LTN 120 at Trafex. Here, this thing, gear change, it's about a 20-minute video. I don't think most of us attending this webinar here tonight will need to go to that, but it's a useful introduction for people who haven't actually read gear change. Some research on bicycle lanes, relationship between passing distance and road characteristics, is actually marginally in favor of painted lines, but saying that, you know, the best things for keeping motor traffic away from bicycles is segregated cycle lanes. So no big shattering news there. Here's a bit of new stuff. An online troll who abused Labour MP over low traffic neighbourhoods was given a suspended sentence. There has been a lot of abuse. Councillor John Burke in Hackney was a classic case of someone being abused. And I think councillors who've been involved have all suffered this kind of thing. So it's good to see a positive response. At the bottom, a paper by Rachel Aldred and James Woodcock on the health, environmental and distributional impacts of cycling uptake and the model underlying the PCT tool, which a lot of you are familiar with. So that's a new bit of research. That's actually dated September of this year. So that's when it'll be published, but you can have a look at it online there. Okay, what's new here? Interesting bit of research here. Private cars are valued not just for their functionality, but also for the freedom, autonomy, or status they offer, or claim to offer, one could say. And here's some quantification about the value individuals assign to car ownership. And it's very much about all this kind of psychological stuff about the status of having a car, the question of relying on it, whether you're actually using it or not. And it's those kind of psychological, cultural things which I think we need to look at a lot about cars, and which traditional transport planning and transport research haven't really looked at. So it's all that kind of I need my car, that sort of panic-stricken reaction that you get when you raise any questions of trying to get modal shift. There's a response from Client Earth about air quality and low traffic neighborhoods tickets still on out there for Thursday, 1st of July. And the article I think I've mentioned before on active and motorized modes working together by Glenn Lyons and colleagues from the University of West of England. Okay, in the UK, in Sefton, 2 Conservative councillors are behind opposition to Southport cycle lane proposals. Greater Manchester, now today there's a really good tweet by Leo Murray on how there has been an exemption for private cars in Greater Manchester's clean air zone or part of the clean air zone. But it brings in a lot of good arguments in a nice little Twitter thread, so do take a look at that. There's a nice bit of information given out by Oxfordshire County Council on school streets, which you might want to look at. And I'm still putting this thing up from Nottingham last week about how they're going to allow ULEV vehicles in bus lanes, which I and a high board of you are very much against. Right, here we go. Widnes. This is your shock photograph of the week. I really do hope the blind people's campaigns in up there in Widnes are actually all over this. Now, here the headline is about how this rugby player, Martin Ofea of Widnes Vikings, returns to the town. And he is a brand ambassador for the company who have actually put these things in. And, you know, if you don't know what's wrong with that, I really can't tell you. But it's a combination of how far the posts are in, the cables being significant trip hazards. What has also been pointed out by some people is they're saying, oh, well, look at that tarmac footway. What they're doing is preparing for taking out this chunk of the footway and turning it into the carriageway and making some sort of noise about easing congestion or whatever else, which would leave only this space here for people wheeling buggies and whatever else. So there's a bit of concern about that. And yes, this is a big issue. You do actually have to read the article to see that he is brand ambassador for these devices. Right, in London, you can see Ruth Mayorkas there. It's a protest in Richmond about the gate outside Richmond Athletic Ground. I think a woman was killed on a bicycle by someone driving out of here. It's a dodgy layout and good to see that they're campaigning against it. I'm repeating this from last week from the TfL board because it gives the figures for the increase in cycling in inner London from 2020 compared to 2019. I mentioned that last week, but do look at those figures. The competition about what kind of design for light segregation is still on, closes on June the 30th. So if you've got any ideas about something nicer than wands or bollards or whatever else, do send it in. Go to look at that link for the guidelines and criteria and do that before June the 30th. Right, now Westminster has come up with some plans for Oxford Street. Do look at Linus Rees, the activist from Fitzrovia. He's saying very little detail, nothing to improve or enable cycling along Oxford Street or nearby. Here's a quote: "The safety and security of pedestrians is paramount and will be improved through the introduction of pedestrian-only piazzas at Oxford Circus to reduce pedestrian congestion. No facilitating of cycling." It's a good thread from LCC on what's wrong with it. It's also linked in with this great big mini mountain at the end of Oxford Street at Marble Arch, which obscures Marble Arch, by the way, for paying customers to come in and have a look at all the surrounding roads. So that's going on. Westminster. In Richmond, some figures on the increase in cycling because of or associated with the first protected cycle lane on Kew Road, increase in usage of 82%, but this is actually from a very low base. Do have a look at that. And Lambeth, I'm afraid, some more vandalizing of LTN infrastructure. And that's happened elsewhere as well, again. This isn't really active travel, but it's related. It's about the bike storms kids who you may have come across. And it's interesting to see that there was a very thoughtful response by the City of London and by the City Police. Rather than just trying to arrest all the kids, they're saying, we want to have children and young people who can visit the city to play with a significantly reduced risk of becoming involved in serious criminal activities, both as victims and perpetrators. Rather, they can spend their time taking part in an active hobby which promotes exercise, with many of them considering it a sport. It's about popping wheelies and that kind of stuff. And they were involved, bike storms, with a sort of demonstrations of knives down, bikes up. Right, here's coming towards the end now, again from Adam Tranter. Very interesting graphic about plans for transport decarbonisation based on the debate. And in I forget which committee that was, but it was in the House of Parliament. And what was mentioned was about half the mentions were about charging points, about a third electric vehicles or electric cars, and just less than a quarter being about active travel, walking or cycling. Bike is best, and this is an excellent campaign. Again, Adam Tranter saying the UK used to lead the world on cycling as late as the 1960s. Huge numbers of journeys were made by bike. We had hills then too, and sometimes rain, yet almost everyone cycled. We're now less active, less healthy, and there's a climate emergency. It's time to go back to the future. And you can see the upturn in 2020. And that is, I think, really good messaging, nice graph, very concise message. Well done, Adam, and bike is best. And the final slide is of something from Dave Walker's new book of cartoons, which is out on July the 8th. And you can order it from his website, From A to B, Dave Walker. This is one on storage of private property in the street. Cars are okay, wardrobes, boxes, garden shed, patio furniture, no, and no cycle lane because of cars. Okay, so anything you want to tell me about what I've got wrong?
Any points of order for Bob?
Yes.
Go on, Mark.
Bob, you over-egged the announcement about Section 6, I'm afraid. It wasn't in Hansard. It was a speech by Charlotte Vere, Baroness Vere, at Trafex. Yeah. So it was a completely informal...
Trafex.
It was at Trafex. It was an informal, not informal, it was a formal speech, but it wasn't to Parliament. So when she says December, that's not an official government announcement. That's a sort of flag-waving, flying ministerial speech, which we hope would be backed up in Parliament, but until somebody asks a PQ and she says that in Parliament, and even then you wouldn't stick to it. But until we actually hear it, from a formal statement from DFT, they've made that sort of statement before, and it's just, it's just a pinch of salt. And I just wanted to raise one thing on the abuse side of things. So our chair of Transport Committee, which is happening right now in Brighton, Amy Healy, is 24, 25. And there's been a horrible, scurrilous flyer going around on Facebook saying that she wants to ban cars in Brighton, and she wants to take cars away from drivers. We might actually think that's a good idea, but anyway, she doesn't. And saying this woman is only 25, she's never had a proper job. She doesn't know what she's talking about. She doesn't have a driving license, all of which is rubbish anyway. And she's been getting lots and lots of abuse. So this is real and happening now, and it's really horrible.
Yeah. I do hope she's being advised about taking records of phone calls and other incidents. You know,
oh yeah, the legal side. I mean, it's been removed from our local. It's on people are putting. I'm not even going to dignify by saying where you can find it, but I mean, one question I do have though, and it's a question I'd like some feedback on. Some of the people on the local group who may even be here, I think they had a letter in the local paper, the Argus. And they think, oh, we should write a letter back, a fact-filled letter debunking all the crap that there is in this thing. My view is it's so vile and so awful that we should just ignore it and completely not at all react in any way, apart from legally. And I'm being told, no, we can't let it go. We can't let it go. We must respond. And I'd be really interested in other people's viewpoints as what you deal with the really outrageous stuff, not the sort of, the usual controversy stuff, but the really outrageous stuff, whether I am right or whether they're right and we should respond.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what my understanding is from a lot of people in London is you make your case quietly and politely. And when people simply don't, there will be that kind of 10, maybe 20% who just aren't going to accept it. And after you've made your case and been polite, then you don't bother with them. And if it actually gets into threats, then you have to record it, and then you have to seek response from police or whoever. That's my view.
Yeah, I'm sharing that with Bob. I'll bring Claire in a second as well. But yeah, just like it's that whole clickbait thing, isn't it, of not reacting?
Yeah, I think if it's on social media in particular, I mean, I've talked about this a few times and almost been drawn into it, and then somebody has pulled me out of it. Don't react to the cranks is the very good advice I've had.
Yeah, that's what I have a kind of like never say anything negative Twitter rule that I try desperately to hold on to.
Yeah.
When they really come at you, and I get some pretty decent abuse ones as well, just go, all right. But yeah, as soon as you respond and they've won, and then everybody knows about, everybody that follows you knows about, and you just spread the pain. And then if anybody responds to it on your behalf, then they're involved in the whole loop. And
yeah, exactly. That's how Twitter works.
Yep. So
there was something on the news today about how negative things get twice as much responses as positive things. So yeah, Twitter is basically designed around that.
Yeah, no, my biggest tweet ever was one where I just showed like a 2-minute video of a light waiting to change going, this is everything that's wrong with walking in the UK. I just got ultra thousands and I broke my rule of being negative, and I felt terrible about it. But yeah, that was the one that went out there. Did I see a few other hands up? Claire, did you want to come in? I saw your hand floating before, but
I was just gonna add, because I was aware, I'm not sure whether this has been flagged up before, but so I assume people are aware that Chris Boardman has now been given an expanded role in Greater Manchester as Transport Commissioner. I don't know whether that's been covered before.
I think I might have mentioned it. It was given a fair amount of publicity.
Yeah, I think it was in your slide pack, Bob.
We did a Q&A with him last week, Walk Ride, and he gave some really, I thought, kind of, it didn't really sort of give political answers. He kind of, I'll put it in the chat actually. It's quite interesting answers that I think signalled, that by appointing, a transport commissioner rather than a walking and cycling commissioner, Burnham's vision is now an integrated transport system, as he calls it, a London style system. So his first move's been to give Boardman this expanded role, and Boardman's already, I think, talking in the right way about, you know, so yes, he thinks there'll need to be a restructure. Yes, he thinks pavement parking needs tackling with some sort of new approach. Yes, he thinks that road safety's been his biggest failing and wants to rectify that. So it's good to hear him talking like that. And then secondly, you've highlighted the Leo Murray thread about the clean air zone, but I just want to, like, basically Greater Manchester is going ahead with its clean air zone. That was announced yesterday, and it will be starting from next March. And private cars have always been excluded to the dismay of all of us. But furthermore, that they've actually given a bit more time for the taxi drivers to get their polluting vehicles in shape. So, but it's interesting because a lot of cities have actually pulled out of the clean air zone entirely. So, you know, who knows? Anyway, that's just the Greater Manchester bit of top line from that. There's the Boardman Q&A. If you're interested, I'll put it in the chat.
Thanks for that, Claire. Dave, is that your hand that you're waving at me?
It is indeed, Brian.
Oh, you muted yourself again. That big hand. What are you doing to me?
Right, that's better.
There we go.
Yeah, can I share something briefly as well? Just to be careful what you ask for with a segregated facility. Let's see if we can do it.
Oh, you trying it? Oh, what are you going to
This,
say? Okay.
that's Danny McCaskill on a segregated facility. As you can see, there's his shadow and his mate riding in front of him. And I think the previous is the wrong one. Take that. And that is the segregated facility you can see at the level of Danny's nose. Grade separated by 6 feet. So do be careful what you ask for. To pick up on, let's unshare that. Can you unshare me rather than me find the unshare? Steve, can you unshare me? Lovely. The other is that with Claire, we did a report about 10 years ago for Metrolink carrying bikes. We need to resurrect that, I think, very much for late night journeys home. It extends the range of a lot of people to be able to get the metro in from somewhere like Bury and cycle the last bit through the city centre. So I think that's an area we want to take up with Manchester. And the fact that we've now got a complete M62 mayors from Liverpool through to Sheffield. So if they all decide to work together for the same party, we might have a really brilliant integrated transport, you know, bikes plus trains plus coaches right the way through.
Thanks, Dave. Yeah, that's definitely the plan. All right, I'll move on to like our first speaker. I've been trying to get on for weeks now, but now the stars have aligned. Carolyn, are you happy to talk to us about car-free days? That's all about, isn't it? Or maybe she's making a cup of tea. No.
I am here, Brian, but I do actually have to dash off now. But I've put it in my calendar for next week, and I might even have some slides.
All right, next week. Yeah, we'll stick with the cars for another week until you come back, and I'll just get rid of them.
And then we'll get rid of them all. Yeah, that's great. See you all next week. Thanks.
All right, brilliant. I think what we'll do then, yeah, a little bit loose this week. But like what I was going to do was pick up, because we've been doing our kind of infrastructure special. So remember 2 weeks ago, we looked at what kind of hot topics we wanted to get into. And then I brought in like the country's 2 leading infrastructure experts, Phil Jones and Ranty, Mark there, to answer all the questions. And then we forgot all the infrastructure and just had a whole philosophy of infrastructure debate, which was really interesting, I have to say. But then what I wanted to do was go back and pick up on some of the topics that people raised. So I'm going to like open up a series of kind of street views. It's always about trying new formats and wrecking the whole process. But I thought we'd go through some of those topics. And the first one I wanted to discuss. So it's a bit of a free-for-all discussion this now, and hopefully you'll stick your hand up if you want to contribute, so it's not like a complete madness. Or by all means, if you can't help yourself, on you unmute and launch. But watch out for it. The first topic, I think that was a really interesting one, and one that I've got more history with than most, is two-way against one-way in the cycle track department. So I'll do a little bit of an intro on it, and then I thought we could have a little bit of a discussion. Sound good? Yeah. You don't have a choice, do you? Like, what can you do? Let's have a look at this. And that's the great thing about Street View. You can see side roads over time. So yeah, this is Royal College Street in Camden, like it runs north-south between King's Cross and the Camden town area where the market is, all the rest of it. Yeah, and this side street's like back in the day when I was a Camden officer, I spent many an hour looking at this side street, just thinking what's wrong with two-way tracks, as I call them, bi-directionals, if you want to call them, albeit when I was working on the superhighways in London, I was calling them separate roads, the exclusive use of cycle traffic. But anyway, this is like a two-way track going past the side road. And this is, it's shame doesn't go back a few years earlier, because this was like our mitigation for the spate of collisions that were happening, particularly like with vehicles turning in. So like the road that you can see, like that's cutting across from right to left, is one way from right to left, albeit 2 lanes. So we had quite a few cars that were turning in there. And so anybody coming out from where we're facing used to look, any driver that is, used to look to the right to see if any of those oncoming cars were going, see that it was clear and then pull out. So the main type of collision we had with this two-way track is that like the visibility is not great on the approach. So cyclists that were going from left to right, like on the unexpected side of the road, would come down, and it's actually slightly downhill as well. So we got the drivers that would come up, look to the right, go, it's clear, pull out, not see a cyclist that was coming from left to right. That was like the fundamental one. So what you see in the picture here is our attempt to make drivers look left before merging onto that one-way street. So you can see like, yeah, I'll spin you it round just so you can see this red. We painted all the carriageway red on the approach to make the drivers think that conspicuity argument. The stop line went in, warning, flashing lights, warning, two-way cycle track ahead, raised the whole junction, tightened the whole junction, coloured the whole junction, and certainly weren't bold in just throwing the full, everything we had to try and make drivers kind of slow down and look out for it. So then we did all this, and then carried on with the accident reporting, and I stood at that site and looked at the drivers, and probably 1 in 10 looked left on the approach there. It's like a real like watershed moment for me. I was like, wow, there's a real problem with these two-way tracks. A couple of years later, you can see they're well used. There's a kid, father and his son like using it, like since 2008 or something. So yeah, but people were using it, but particularly the cyclists going the other way was a real issue. And just around the corner on the two-way track, we had a fatality as well. And also, I will say that the instances of collisions along this road were way higher than the borough average, albeit, you know, particularly with cyclists, albeit it had a lot more cyclists than other roads, I consider it. So anyway, I was standing there going, what can we do to make them look left? And how do we resolve these issues? And Camden asked me, said, sort out the collisions, do what it takes. We can't keep having this. It was almost like the advert for why segregation doesn't work, because at the time in London, and like in particular, and the view across was like, yeah, you're forcing people to an unexpected side of the road. They're not watching out for it. It's not safe. There's still people that kind of share this view now. We're saying, well, every time you protect, they're going to be exposed at the junction, and really you should reintroduce cyclists into the general traffic at junction so cars know they're there, rather than having them pop out from segregation, not being spotted. So it was a real big issue to resolve. And I'll keep going through the history, and someone will tell me if there's a hand up. But I just want to show what it's like now. I go back a year because there's some work on there now. Ah, yeah, there's some work there. Let's do it when there's not any works going on. There's always works going on in London. How long was that? Oh yeah, that was that gas thing. Okay. Oh, well, this is a kind of interim one. I've had to go back to 2017. Well, basically, the decision that we made in Camden at the time was to split it on either side of the road and to never ever do two-way tracks again. And when I went over to Transport for London, we were like, I was going over Camden going, like, Camden will never do a bi-directional track ever again. We've had enough. We tried to be the new Amsterdam. We put these things in, but the collision records were terrible with them. And we ended up unpicking them all at great expense and making them back to a cycle track on either side. And there was people at TfL that were saying, well, yeah, no, we're help us drum these things out of the industry. So I'm doing a little bit of a bad show. But then when I was working on the East West and North South superhighways, we're going, well, actually, there's some real efficiencies for having a two-way track in there. You can avoid some junctions, and there are some like real capacity benefits for cyclists that you can overtake, and there's a little bit more like flexibility in the arrangement. If we can make it work, there could be something into it. And one thing I didn't know of at the time, you know, which to my shame, and no one had really tied it in with a cycle track, was continuous footways. And I thought, oh, I've tried everything engineering wise, but does the continuous footway work? So I think that's one thing that helps resolve it and makes the two-way track work. The other thing I'll say, particularly when I was doing the two-way tracks for the North, South and East West superhighway, I was definitely going, we're not making tracks, we're making roads for the exclusive use of cycle traffic. So every side road is treated with an offset, it's treated like it's a junction in itself. There's a side road going off, and you'll notice on the North-South superhighway in particular, when vehicles turn in, there's place for them to yield before they go across the bi-directional, as it were. So there was lots of things that were put in, and when we got to signal junctions, it was treated properly. So I really tried to ramp it up to make sense. And I know Camden will take a long time before they go back to two-way tracks, but there's lots of like design stuff we can do now that maybe we can't before. So really, yeah, that's kind of what I wanted to show and kind of get people's view on it, really. I'll just go into the junction a little bit. So you can see now they put in the full curbs, and it's hard to see on this one in there, but you've got the cycle track going through, and it's got the stop line, and it's back simple arrangement, one on either side. But I've noticed like that lots of bi-directional tracks are going in there, but they're just going in like in line with the junction, kind of like we used to have in Camden, and I've been really worried that they'll pick up the same issues that we had. So I'm like, if you look at LTN 120, it's got how to take a cycle track on one way past the side road. It's got like the standard details for those, and I swear by those. But when it comes to bi-directionals, I always think you've got to go one level above, and really like we've got parallel crossings and continuous footways, and I think it's got to be at least one of those two to make a bi-directional work past. And any scheme I see where they're just trying to like survive on an entry treatment, I get really nervous about. So that's the debate that I thought we could have, and see what people think about that. I'll just pull the chat up so I can see if anybody's hand, but maybe I'll stop sharing. Yeah, let's do that. So what do people think about that infrastructure wise? I've given you a little bit of like a potted tour of two-way tracks, but it's a hot one. I've looked at it a long time. It goes into that kind of side road issues, and how do you start and end these things is the other kind of like design issue. I kind of think a lot of the lessons we learned from Camden aren't necessarily being passed on to the rest of the country now, which is why I'm kind of mentioning it. They're going to get those same design flaws that we had in Camden, and we don't want to see the collisions go up as the cycling numbers go up. So it's a hot one. Anybody got any take on that? Or
is Robert Wheatman on the call tonight?
But yeah, I know he's got his views, isn't he? I can't see him
because he has a brilliant quality assessment strategy for side road junctions on his blog. I've pointed out to many people about the way in which you can judge how side road passing continuous footway works properly. and it includes all those things that you just raised about having enough space to be able to stop and cross, and the setback junctions and so on. I've not found anything better.
Yeah, it's definitely continuous footways. I think it's definitely one of those things you can look at. It's just in some places, in fact, most places, it's quite a difficult sell to get them in. You know, and then it's, do you use them with tactile? Is there an issue with visually impaired people? So I swear by them in the right context, and I think you've got to be at least that high in terms of like making drivers slow down to make people. But I really swear by parallel crossings as well. They're really my go-to if I'm taking a bi-directional past the side road. I think that's the clearest indication of them all. And you know, I wish I had that back in like 2005-6 when I was looking at that junction, and I would have jumped on it. It does require a little bit of a setback, but we can get an inline one. I think that's the like the fix-all issue.
Yep.
Whereas the continuous footways, you know, people do have issues with them, you know, with kids and visually impaired groups. So, but you know, I can defend those. But I think in most like contexts, if it's a busy road and you've done a bi-directional to kind of avoid some like junctions and stuff, then you're probably making more of a case for a parallel crossing. Where if you're doing it in a kind of nicer context area, then push for the continuous. But if you go much lower, you can see we tried everything in Camden. Just watch yourself if you're just relying on a raised entry treatment. That's my view on this one. But yeah, Robert's gonna just think, you know, you can get yourself into big trouble if you just go, there's just this way of doing it, and every other way is wrong. Like it depends what you're, I'm probably misrepresenting in there, but it depends what kind of context you're going and what, you know, what you can build and what the level should be at. Anybody else want to jump in, or?
Can I say a very quick one, because I've got to go and run. First of all, congratulations on your bit this afternoon. That was excellent. Thank you, Brian. Much appreciated. Not only the best entry slide I've seen, but you asked some really good questions and not insulting the audience, but being a good critical friend. So yeah, nice job on that. On this specific side road one, my take is, if there's any possibility of people thinking it's what it normally is, you need to make it completely different. And that for me falls into the miserable compromise. It sort of does tell you it's two-way. As soon as you feel the need to put a sign up saying it's two-way, you've lost it because people won't follow the sign. If intuitively it looks like it's one way, people will go one way. That's my take. Signs don't work. As soon as you need a sign, it's wrong.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right, making it look weird. And thanks to Steve to point out there are lots of hands up. I just couldn't see them because I'd scrolled down the other end of the thing. All right, we'll go through the hands now. That's why
I've got to head off, but thanks, Brian. Another great session.
Cheers, Kate. Yeah, brilliant, and good points about like making it look weirdly different so people know.
Either properly different or not at all. Nothing in between.
Which I think like the continuous footway and the parallel crossing does, you know, oh, what's that doing there? All right, let's go through some of the hands then. So it is a hot topic. We'll just make it up. Charles, what's happening?
Wendy from?
Yeah, thanks, Brian. Yeah, look, I defer to everyone else in the group who a lot more traffic engineering knowledge, but
it's just a regular thing, not hugely important.
Hello.
Am I? We're just waiting for Steve to mute the chatters. Sorry, go on, Charles.
Yeah, sorry, just to say, I mean, I'm sure other people have got some hard and fast right and wrongs about this, but surely sort of one thing one always needs to take into account is just consistency. And if there's a huge variability in options, what Kate's really interesting, if you actually said, look, we're going to stick to sort of 5 solutions across the country, however complicated they are, people get used to them. But maybe we're just not structured to do consistency in the UK.
Well, the thing, like, we've gone a long way with LCN 120. Phil was here, I'm sure we talk about it. He's given like for the one way, you know, there's 8 options. I kind of want that 9th, but you know, there's kind of 8 ways of doing it. So I think that's good. It's not like, you know, the Dutch way where you've got like, yeah, there's 3 ways of doing this. That's all the context we've got. Always like a struggle in the UK because we've got lots more context of different streets, and we've never really had a uniformity of design. You know, or be, you know, maybe we'll work towards that.
But isn't that part of the issue?
Design manual for streets one day. So go on, Charles.
Yeah, isn't that the issue? Not having a uniformity of design. You know, everyone wants to sort of do their own thing. So the person who comes into that junction in a driver, they're just, you know, New City is going to be doing one thing, and a Camden are doing something else.
I'm with you, but there's also like a variety of culture and approaches and streetscape and patterns, and we kind of don't want to lose that.
You're advocating the multicultural London junctions.
But I do think, you know, I agree with you when it comes to like side roads. I always start training when we talk about side roads and say, like, I've been doing this for many years now. I can't tell you how to take a cycle track past the side road. I can tell you everything we tried and the pros and cons of different scenarios, but we haven't quite nailed it yet. But I think the closest we've come to nailing it is like a continuous footway tie-in in like a lower traffic environments, and the parallel crossing tie-in and like higher traffic environments. And I just want to say that, and the missing one on the top right in LTM 120, the inline zebra, if it all goes well in Manchester and we can get like a zebra like right on the desire line, I can tie that in with elephant footprints. I want to say, yeah, just do it like that. I'll take it out to 1 and I'll have that. But yeah, so the real like juicy options we're kind of missing at the moment. But
let's all copy Manchester when it's out there.
Yeah, good old Manchester. All right, I'll bring in Shane, our man from across the waters. What's happening, mate?
Me? No, thanks very much, Brian. I mean, it's very what's the word I'm looking for? It's very good news to hear that these things are being reviewed and performance is being analyzed and that things are being changed if they're not working. As far as I know from my reading, and I don't have the sources here because I wasn't ready for it, but even the Dutch and the Danes, if you ask them, the only thing that makes cycle track crossing safe is raised footways. That's it. That's as far as like, there's been arguments back and forth about elephants' footprints and red colored crossings and everything, but I think it's the continuous footway is what makes the side roads crossing safe. And I don't know if Robert Wheatman here, but it is back to the argument that I was making about the low traffic neighborhoods, is that in the Netherlands where you find a continuous footway, it's nearly always a side road that's going into what's effectively a low traffic neighborhood. That they're local access roads, possibly even just one-way street going into a local access road. So you're not catering for two-way in and out on the side road. There probably isn't cars turning from the opposite side of the road into the I don't know if I'm explaining that correctly, but you know what I mean. There isn't someone turning right off the main road across the cycle track and having to anticipate something coming up over what would be our right shoulder. No, I've nothing more. I think so. Really, the push is for continuous footways wherever you can find them, however you can do them.
Yeah, so I'm with you. In one context, but we're really unsure in the UK in particular about doing continuous footways. If there's a really busy road, if it's like a connector road that you go on that takes you through the town, and like you've still got that, it's maybe not quite enough for a full signalisation, but you've got a fair amount of traffic coming in and out. Most people are nervous about doing a continuous footway in that scenario because, well, for good and obvious reasons, which is where I think like if you round about that 8,000 vehicles are under leveled, like a parallel crossing comes into its own. So I still think that's the case. And I know in the Netherlands they tend to signalise the parallels, and I was going to show a little example of that later. So there's still that kind of option in there, but I don't think like Robert that there is the one solution. I think we need to have, like as engineers, like different options for kind of stronger traffic volumes. And for me, that's where the parallel crossing comes in, and that's why I've been promoting that on the kind of, you've got an A road. If you've got like a C and unclassified or like a connector that you're putting in, then yeah, push for the continuous footways. It's going to be great if it ties in with an active neighbourhood, the low traffic neighbourhood, then brilliant. But if you've got an A road, that's filtering all the roads off, but there's still side roads that are quite heavy off it, and like struggle to justify like a continuous footway in that respect. So I kind of think we need the two. I'd probably lay a couple more. I think the Dutch would go. I tend to see them use signal, parallel, or continuous, but sometimes they do use just the markings as well.
But If it's any consolation, the Dutch have found two-way cycle tracks that have admitted it themselves that they're a problem, that they're a safety problem, and there is a paper out there that came from the Fietsersbond and from, who's the guy with the SWV, Paul Shapers, if you've heard of him, and they put out a paper saying that two-way cycle tracks are a problem in the Netherlands, and that they're stuck with them now, but they don't want to push that as a model. I think that's me reading between the lines, but they have found a problem with them as well, and they're like,
I think most people in the world have kind of come to that conclusion. But if you do treat it like a separate road beside the road, so you're making the kind of the superhighway model, and that's the international superhighway model where you are making this road for cycle traffic, then yeah, you treat it like any other road, and it's good while you're turning and you're dealing with the junctions properly. And I think there's scope for that as well. Someone who's a bit scratchy, he's getting a bit scratchy on us. But yeah, no, good points, Sharon, as always. I'll bring in Mark now. Go on, Mark. We've got history with this. Mark Strong.
Thanks. Yeah, I thought you might meet Mark Philpotts, actually. I think it's entirely context dependent, and it depends where you are and what you're doing. I mean, obviously, when you've got a river or a seafront, so the embankment is another good case. I was going to say Brighton seafront embankment. If you've got no side roads on one side, then it makes a hell of a lot of sense to put it on the side with no side roads. There is an issue about access, and I think rather than looking at one or two way routes, which is an issue, it's about where you're going. If you are starting at A and getting to B and not worrying about what you do in the middle of that route, then it has a value. You can look at it from that. If you're starting at A1 and going about 100 yards and going off to the other side, then there starts getting issues. And that's when you start looking at the sort of people who make the journeys. If you're looking at the average male commuter who starts at one end and goes 4 miles down a protected track, they make sense. If you're looking at what are mostly going to be women or family people doing short dogleg trips, then you start getting into very different issues. So even the Valley Gardens route here in Brighton, which is great, it's not great if you're trying to get onto or off it. And the problem with two-way tracks is they're really useless for people on the other side of the road who might only want to go a short distance. And the problem with one-way tracks are they're useless for people who are going the wrong way on the one-way track on the other side of the road, going a short distance. And the only thing that really works is two-way tracks on both sides. But that's another story.
Yeah, it's an interesting point that. So when we're doing the north-south superhighway, it's interesting. It's like to get out of it and effectively get back on the right side of the road. There's 2-stage left turns in there, which are really interesting. So yeah, everybody knows the kind of 2-stage right one, but lots of people find that unintuitive to go on the wrong side of the road. But the 2-stage left, everybody kind of got, and I was quite surprised at how well they work that people do to come out the track, wait in the middle of the junction, and then like in a little pocket to go back into the main side of the road. So I think that actually works really well. I mean, cycle gates are another good way of mixing, but it used to be, I used to advise people if you end in or even start in a two-way track, to do it at a full road closure, so everybody can just get themselves sorted out in a safe space. I think it can be done quite well at signal control junctions as well, if you can get the timing right, albeit, because you've got effectively someone to make a diagonal movement. You can't let many other things move in that, so it can have a real efficiency impact. Anyway, bit much there, but yeah, you're absolutely right. There are some huge benefits to it, particularly in terms of space efficiency and avoiding congested junctions and the like of it. So yeah, and that's a pretty good one behind your head, Mark, as well, I have to say. All right, I'll bring in.
Thanks on that. I won't take credit for it. It's thanks for that.
Yeah, cheers, mate. Caroline.
Hello. Surely the issue, the particular example you gave, is the fact that it's a one-way road. So the motorists are only expecting vehicles, including cyclists, to come from one direction. And so we shouldn't condemn all two-track cycleways just because it doesn't work very well when it's on to a one-way road.
Yeah, now that's a really good point, and a lot of people made that. And if we made the Royal College Street one, if that went to two-way, would that mitigate it? I think to an extent, but still, you've got vehicles that are merging. They know the traffic's coming near side, and if they're doing a left, then that's that's how it's going to be clear on that near side. So you still got they might do more of a cursory look to the left before they merge. But I found that issue right across, even when it was two-way roads, like the way vehicles merge in. But in some cases, it's the right turn in that's kind of a bigger issue. So if you imagine on that one, the vehicles were coming the other way and the right turning in, they've turned in before they've noticed that there's a cyclist coming on the near side or the wrong side of the road. So actually that can be a bigger issue in that scenario. So there's safety issues that pop up even if it's a two-way road. But on that particular instance, yeah, it was a hot one because you're going into multiple lanes one way. But I find the right turn in can be a real problem with two ways as well, of them not looking back round over the shoulder. It's that whole they've turned and they're across the junction by the time they can see that there's the cyclist coming. So yeah, as I said, I think there's big safety issues that need to be resolved, and the ways of resolving those, I think we've looked at hinting them. The continuous footway will mean any right turn they're coming in will have to stop and cruise across and make sure that looking out for pedestrians, which will also keep cyclists safe. And if there's a parallel crossing, they're like formally told to yield. So all that stuff might keep them waiting in the junction rather than looking for an opportunistic time to hook right across. Hope you can visualize that.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to picture of it. But yeah, no, it's a good point. Lots of people said just make it two-way and it'll work. But the one around the corner was two-way, and that's where we had the fatality. Tricky business, isn't it? All right, thanks, Caroline. I hope that helped. Martin?
Yeah, I just wonder if a lot of this is actually about budget and about existing layouts, and the fact that we're often trying to shoehorn things into existing layouts and not spend the money on complete reconfiguration. The Isle of Wight Council have today released plans for this, including exactly what we're talking about: a two-way cycle track crossing a side turning. It's actually only a side turning into a car park, but it's a side turning into a car park with a large number of spaces, a hovercraft terminal, and a coach park. And you see there's ample space to do something different with this particular highway layout. It's a huge, vast, relatively low flow dual carriageway road. But I think the design that they've come up with is based around a budget solution that doesn't allow them for reconfiguring the entire highway layout. And I think that's part of the problem, is that when you look at some of the schemes the Dutch move forwards, they're radical reconfiguration of roads, and I think we're still so far behind on that. And I wonder what hope there is sometimes when we're throwing small budgets at things, of getting things done right. So my fear with this one is it will get put in like this and it will get fairly quickly withdrawn and moved back to a non-priority crossing.
Well, treating that side road is not necessarily going to add a huge amount of expense. Yeah, I agree with you. If you start with a blank canvas and go, right, let's reapportion this properly and efficiently, then great. But even if you're working on a low budget, you can still get the issues right. So I still think like there's different side road treatments, and I've been talking about them, that would be a lot more effective there. I wouldn't necessarily add much to the budget. They're already like sorting out that side road, the changing the curb alignment, the redoing the paving. That's all the expense. To set it back and tie it with a parallel crossing wouldn't be a huge expense to go with it, bearing in mind what they're doing. So they would have those options, and even if it was set back and they had enough space for one car to turn in and then yield to it, there's still space to do that.
Yeah,
they could consider the continuous footway, but like with the and there's the right turn pocket coming in as well, which is good. Really good for making that two-way track work, because at least the cars can sit there and wait and like time their way across. But we still need something to make them look out for that cyclist going there effectively the wrong way. And that's where like the parallel crossings and the setback and the continuous ones really help in that regard, because they make people look for pedestrians and then they'll spot cyclists at the same time. So for me, it doesn't comply with the LCN 120 one-way cycle track. So for me, that's a kind of no, and I'd say you've got to do at least one of these. And like I said, when it comes to a two-way track, I want to see the the strongest possible version. So i.e. continuous or like the parallel crossing. So they're the options that are shown in LTN 120. So if this came across my desk, I go, this isn't compliant with LTN 120. The give way on the exit should be set back. So it almost like implies it's for pedestrians. They've got to have some kind of entry treatment, and you've got 8 options to choose from. You know, pick one, but that's not any of them. So you've got like so that would be the issue. They haven't followed the latest standards, and I think, you know, that should be pointed out to them. Now, there's issues either end as well with the shed on that one. I don't want like do a complete design with
Oh.
But they should be looking at the latest standards, and they should be applying it to them. And what I've
Yeah.
been talking, there's a little bit of a nuance about taking it one step higher just to be belt and braces on a two-way track. So they haven't done something that would work one way, and two ways even trickier. So yeah, pass that on with my love.
Will do. Thanks.
All right, Robert. Bob.
Same moi. There is, I mean, it always depends on exactly how people get on to and off the bidirectional. But broadly speaking, there's always going to be an issue that a bidirectional will mean that in one direction, you're going to have to cross across the carriageway to get onto it and back again to come off to it. And that will involve either potential additional danger because you're crossing across carriageway, and or delay by having signals. So that will, I mean, it doesn't always happen that way because of exactly where how you feed into it, but there is going to be that problem. So for example, if you look at the last diagram you were looking at from Isle of Wight, if you were coming up from the bottom into one of the roundabouts and wanted to turn left, there's nothing there. So you would actually have to go onto the roundabout to get onto the bidirectional. So, I mean, you know, you always have to look at each case, but there will always tend to be that kind of problem, which, you know, often gets missed out on, the whole, how you get onto it, how you get off it. That's just my thoughts.
Yeah, let's unpack that one a bit. I'm going to show you, like, because I think the best 2-to-1 way track that I know of is on the north-south superhighway, and we've got a couple of minutes. I'm just going to show you how we resolved taking the two-way back onto either side at either end. Now we'll come to you in a minute, Dave. Honest, I've just got I think this is an important one, so everybody bears with me. Let me just share this again.
Brian, while you're showing, somebody who did the Newport one, was it Isle of Wight? Can they say where it was and who did it in more details, please?
Yeah, that's me. So that's a scheme that's gone out to consultation today, I believe. It's in Ryde Esplanade, and it's part of a major scheme for the interchange there, which has got, I think, 8 different modes all combined on one interchange. And it's part of the National Cycle Network Route 22 runs through there.
Well, we're happy to help. I'm always happy to help. So here we go. We've got the bidirectional cycle track running on this road, and then it's at this circus that it kind of breaks, and it runs across in this parallel crossing, sticks into this side road here, which is effectively filtered. So here, you got the cycle track that's coming in here and the other way across there. So it kind of like blends into a bus-only filter that you kind of can sort yourself out and get back on the right side of the road. If you come this way, it's all good. If you come the other way, you kind of quite zoom into it to show you, but you come in and get back into it that way. And I just want to show you the other end as well, because I think it's probably even better. So a full filter closure is a really good way of doing it. I'll just show you the other way, because I think this is even better. Well worth getting right. It's right about here, isn't it? Drop yourself down the side road. Okay. So yeah, here's like a really juicy one. So at this point, it's a cycle track on either side of the road. When you come in this way to get over into the track, it's got its own separate set of signals. I don't know why it's not moving. There we go. You got your own set of signals, you wait, and then it signals you over. And come the other way, you're just rolling straight through. I'll just try and give you a better view of that. So that, I think, is the best two-way to one-way on either side conversion that I know of. Really nicely done. It goes from the two-way. You've got this massive stop line to go. It's really efficient that you go across with the pedestrians. So when you've got a green to come across here, the pedestrians are going and the other cyclists are held out, but you've all bunched up because the main flow has been going, and then you all wiggle across in a big pile and you're back onto the two-way track, which runs all the way for a couple of miles to that next junction that I showed you. And coming this way, you just straight through into the track. I think that's as good as it gets for like sorting out a two-way track, I think, and it's done mid-link as well and tied in with a pedestrian crossing. So there are good ways of doing it, and there's some really good best practice out there to watch, because it is like that. And they're for me like I'll call them classics, albeit, you know, I was insisting on this kind of thing at the time. Like, to stop it in a filter, great, everybody can sort themselves out, or to fully signalize it so everybody knows what they're doing and there's no kind of risk of having to merge from the normal side of the road to the unexpected side of the road. You won't want to be doing that mid-link uncontrolled. So got to really formalize the movements when it comes to two-way tracks. You know, and if we were to look at it, I'll show you a couple, just to finish up on this. Just going to show you how some of the side roads are handled. It's just as important. So there you go. Look at the, you can all see that it's gone a bit black here. You can see there's the separate road for exclusive use of cycle traffic beside the road, and any cars that are turning in aren't turning straight in across the track. They're turning in, they're just turning and yielding to another road. That's how serious I think you've got to take the side road junctions, and that's what we're aiming to do. And we've got some like different multiple uses out of this area as well. Cycle hire on there. There's like all sorts of cabling and ducting underneath there. That's fundamentally the road beside the road. So I think that's a really good solution as well, to do the setback. But on that bombshell.
I just want to share with you two things, if I may. Rob showed this. I asked him to share this last week. This was, I don't know if you can see all that. This was a link my son sent me. And I just think we need to recognise the young people appropriating road space. I'm not a great fan of drum and bass, but here's a guy on a bicycle. It goes on for an hour, and it's really good thing to see. He's getting cars positively hooting at him, and he's got a whole bunch of cyclists. So I think that's sort of thumbs up to the young people. It might not be what we choose to do, but the thing I really wanted to share was this wonderful book I finished last week. It's called The Book of Trespass by Nick Hayes. He's also an illustrator. That's one of his pictures there. And most of it's all about landowners. You could say, what's that got to do with what we meet for? And he's not against rich landowners. He's about having the right to roam and the fact that 3% of the people own 97% of the land. But one chapter when he's in a city, and I just sort of, he's talking about the spaces in city, and I'm just going to read this out. The way space is divided, or in other words, the way place is constructed, has a direct influence on the people who operate within it. It affects their habits, customs, and ideologies. The decision of who and what space is for directly shapes the structure of the society within it. What is allowed, what is encouraged, and what is forbidden. And I just suddenly thought that touched on all our efforts in this group. So I know it's not about landowning, it's about the road space. And I just think it's a pat on the back to the team, really. So